Started. Welcome everyone to our mid-year meet, our second annual mid-year meeting with the focus on expanding the concept of health equity. We had last year was our first time having this meeting, and it was provided an opportunity or platform to hear from our members and provide some quick updates on what we've been doing as a section. I mean, we're continuing that today with guest speakers, as well as some contributions from our esteemed colleagues in our section. So it's going to be a pretty tight agenda. Again, as some housekeeping items, please remember to keep your phone or your mic on mute. We will use the hand raise function if we have time during our Q&A session, but also we'll be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions that occurred during our presentations, please be sure to add them in there, and we'll get them we'll get to as much as we can throughout the presentations. And again, as was noted, if this meeting is being closed captioned, so you can you'll see the option. There'll be I think there's a CC on your screen that you can click, and that would allow you to join in. Our chair, Ebony Johnson, will be joining later on today, so I'll be taking the first part of this meeting. But again, welcome and thank you for coming. For those of you who may not be familiar with the Community Health Planning and Policy Development section, we are a multidisciplinary section, one of the oldest sections and one of the largest sections of APHA, with our focus trying to bring together again, as our name shows, the policy as well as advocacy and implementation in the community, and how we can put the system together to help improve public health. And we apply a health equity framework in a lot of things that we do. And so we welcome you today, and today's presentations highlight the work that we do in this section. Just some quick updates of activities that have occurred throughout the year. Earlier in March, we had our town hall meeting, which was more of like a business meeting for our section, providing some quick updates of what we were doing, particularly updates that had occurred at the 2021 annual meeting, as well as we had some networking activities and a Q&A session for folks to engage in. If you want to see the slides from that presentation, you can visit our YouTube page. I think the link will be provided on the chat soon, so stay tuned. But we have a live YouTube page that really brings together all our events that we record, including the event today. Actually, as I'm saying this, are we recording?
Yes.
Yes, I just want to make sure we are. Okay. And so today's meeting will be posted within 2 weeks, and so stay tuned. If you registered, we'll send a reminder email, let you know that when it is posted. But you can find this, and as well as our events that occurred during National Public Health Week during the first week of April, led by our student committee and led by our liaison, Gilbert Arvizu, sorry for butchering your name. But we had a series of events that have taken place each day, and a lot of those presentations are posted on our YouTube page as well. Just a quick update, as we are in the midst right now really planning for our annual meeting in Boston in the first week of November, the 6th to the 9th. We had over 350 abstracts submitted to our section alone. So we are now going through those and navigating and trying to select the ones that will be part of our sessions. We have over 55 oral and poster presentations that we are responsible for at the section. It will cover a wide range of topics, as you see here, addressing racism, discrimination, care coordination, health equity, and so forth. So stay tuned. You should be seeing more announcements about the meeting coming soon. For those who did submit abstracts, thank you for submitting to our section. And for those who were abstract reviewers, very special thanks, because it is really your volunteer help that really helps get us through this process. So thank you for your time. Also, elections are currently taking place. You should have received an individual link for your ballot based off of your membership number from, I think it was Elections on behalf of APHA. That notice came out last Wednesday, I believe. And so please check your spam if you didn't see that. And if you didn't get that notice, if you're part of CHPPD, excuse me, please feel free to reach out to me directly, and I can follow up with with our membership services to make sure that a ballot has been cast. You have a ballot that you can cast. But we also this morning sent out a just a quick bios or quick intros to each of our presenters. I'm sorry, not our presenters, our candidates this year. And so please stay tuned. You'll see a link in our chat right now, which gives you, which will direct you to just some quick introductions from our candidates this year. This is our first time putting together this quote unquote forum. Mind you, it is a little bit late, I will admit that, but it was the first time we were doing so. And it was a little bit challenging trying to figure out how to put that together, but we did get that done. And we look forward to continuing this type of process of not only having the, traditionally you would just get that link and you would just vote. And we just want to give a little heads up of who you are actually voting for. And we'll continue that in the future. Joey, if you are there, you can go ahead and jump in and talk about scholarships.
Great, thank you so much. Can you hear me just okay?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are. Just a couple of quick updates about our annual travel scholarship awards. Our applications are now open, and you can find the application link in the chat now. We are offering 8 scholarships, as you can see them broken down here this year, for some of our members to attend our annual meeting in Boston. These dollar amounts will cover the cost of the registration fee, provided that you register before the early bird deadline ends. We still have some time. The applications aren't due until July 22nd, but please, if you are at all interested in attending, we love to be able to support our section members, and please consider submitting an application. If you have any questions or challenges with that application, feel free to shoot me an email and I would be happy to help troubleshoot that with you. You can go to the next slide. And with that, our travel scholarships could not be possible without the support of our section and our section members. We are able to provide these scholarships solely through the donations that we receive from individuals and from different organizations. And so we would very much like to solicit your support to continue to help your fellow section members be able to participate in our annual meetings. We know with COVID-19, many of our section members have experienced various hardships, including financial, and that these scholarships really make a big difference in supporting our section members to be able to participate in the annual meeting. We will put the link here for you to our donation page, but there's also this QR code. If you scan that with your smartphone right now, that will bring you directly to our donation page as well. And just looking at who's on this call right now, if every single one of us donated even just $15, we would be more than a quarter of a way to our $3,000 goal to be able to help fund our travel scholarships for next year's annual meeting. We always like to plan in advance. So please, if you have the time, if you have the resources, I encourage you to donate today. Do the next slide. And lastly, just wanted to give you a little sneak peek about how these travel scholarships make a difference for our section members. This is a quote from one of our recipients last year. Really talking about how the annual meeting is such an excellent learning opportunity, networking opportunity. The possibilities are endless. So your donation really goes directly to your colleagues to help grow our field and help learning across all of our section members. And Maurice, I think I can give it back to you.
Thank you. If this will move, okay, wait. Too fast. I just wanted to give a special nod to all our volunteers and leadership and leaders in our section. We had, you can see, it's a very broad and vast team. It takes a lot of folks to pull together the work that we do in the section. So I just want to give a thank you to everyone for their participation in helping. And if you want to be involved, please feel free to email us at chppdsection@gmail.com. We are always looking for volunteers to help with the various events. This gives you a snapshot of what we do and the various committees that we have. We actually are looking for folks in particular for our annual conference planning. As I noted, we have a lot of abstracts we're trying to navigate, and we need to get those sessions together. We also need to plan for our social that takes place during the year, which includes our awards and so forth. And then we also have launched a new committee, our archiving committee. That being, with it being our 150th, with it being APHA's 150th anniversary, we want to use it as an opportunity to highlight the great work of our section. We're planning an invited session in particular about CHPPD and the work that we've done. And then we're also looking to highlight our history and give that presentation during our social. So if you are interested in helping with that work, that would be very helpful. And again, please feel free to reach out to us at chppdsection@gmail.com. And then the link for that will be provided in the chat later today. And with that, I think I was able to even save 4 minutes. So we are going to be jumping into our presentations, and we're going to start with our featured speaker today, Dr. Nicholas Freudenberg. And again, Nick, as he would like to say, or like to be called. And a quick intro is that he is a distinguished professor of public health at City University of New York School of Public Health and a faculty director of health at CUNY. A university-wide effort to promote the health of CUNY students to support their academic success. With that, I am going to stop sharing and open the floor to you, Nick.
Great, thanks. Let me just get my sharing going. So it's a pleasure to be here. I know a few of you, and I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with all of you. I'll be talking for about half an hour, and then I think we'll have a little time for discussion and questions. I attended my first APHA meeting 45 years ago, long before many of you were born, and it's really been a wonderful forum, both for understanding what's going on in public health and influencing what's going on. And I really congratulate you all and welcome you to using this organization, this forum, to advance our work. And my talk today is based on the belief that another world is possible. Otro mundo es posible. And that idea is really the foundation of effective public health practice, research, and advocacy. And I'll be talking about how the commercial determinants of health can help us to decide on the priorities for the next period in public health. And I hope to answer these questions in our time together this afternoon. I want to briefly define commercial determinants of health and talk about why I think it's useful. I'll talk a little bit about how it differs from social determinants of health, a concept that I think most of us have talked about, studied, worked with before. I want to explore how we as public health professionals and advocates can use commercial determinants of health to improve public health and advance health equity. And I'm so pleased that you've made health equity a center of this meeting today. And it's certainly been something that's been a driving force of my work over the last decades. And then I'm hoping we can together identify some action steps that are informed by the commercial determinants of health framework that would allow us to recover from current public health crises and prevent future ones. So a very simple definition of commercial determinants of health that I like a lot is factors that influence health which stem from the profit motive. And I think understanding how profit shapes health and disease is at the center of what we do. Now, I'm an academic, and of course we have to come up with more convoluted definitions. And so this second definition is one from an article that was in the American Journal of Public Health last year. And I think what it adds is it broadens the notion of commercial determinants of health. It looks at social and political and economic structures, the rules of society, regulation, and the focus again is on business activities designed to generate profits and increase market share, and how they influence all the health outcomes, including and especially equity that we're interested in. And so this is the concept and the framework that we'll be talking about today. And why is now an important time to talk about commercial determinants of health and to rethink how we as public health professionals look at our field? Well, any of us have been paying attention, have seen just this alarming cascade of public health apocalypses in the last decade or two. Of course, the COVID pandemic, but longer term, but no less threatening to human and planetary health, the climate emergency, environmental pollution, deaths of despair, the deaths of people related to opioid overdose, mental health problems, gun violence, workplace injuries and accidents, seen in many high-income countries around the world, the rising burden of non-communicable diseases and mental health disorders, and the growing toll from precarious, low-wage, unsafe work. And I think what we need to be asking is, why have we seen this cascade of public health crises in the last decade or two? And what are the common causes? And is there something different we could be doing that would address those common causes? And to my mind, this requires taking a step back and looking at the political and economic system that has evolved in the 20th century and the first part of the 21st century. And unlike some in our field, I like to use the word capitalism. I think it's important for us in public health to use it. And I'll say more about why I think that's important. And from my work as a researcher, as an activist, as a teacher, what I've come to believe is that changes in 20th century capitalism in the last 50 years or so have made that political and economic system more toxic, more threatening to health. And I think the 6 dimensions of that are the increasing globalization of the economy, and particularly the fact that that globalization is now being managed by several hundred transnational corporations, which have gained an outside voice over the last 50 years in shaping our politics and our economy. A second factor has been financialization, the growing role of financial institutions and financial activities. In the mid-20th century, our business community made things, they produced things, they manufactured. Now they speculate, trade money, create Bitcoin, and the productive forces play a much different role. And that puts a lot of pressure on the political system and on social lives. The third really important trend since the mid-70s has been deregulation, removing the panoply of environmental, consumer, occupational, civil rights, and other regulations, and privatizing healthcare, education, public safety, so many things that used to be in the public sector, moving them into the private sector where profit became a driving force. A fourth factor, so important, and we see it today in the rise of inflation, we see it in supply chain problems, the increasing monopoly concentration of just about every business sector. A lot of my work is in food, and the concentration of the global food industry has given them a power to really shape the world's diet at the expense of the world's health. Another trend, really important, is corporate control of science and technology. In the late 19th century, Louis Pasteur said that science belongs to all humanity, but increasingly it's corporations who own the intellectual property and decide how it's used, and often make their decisions not on what will best help humanity, but what will make the most profits. And finally, as a result of the growing concentration of power in business institutions, they've taken on an ideological dominance and promoted the ideas of individualism, of the market as the solution. And these 6 factors, I think, have led to increasing stratification by race, class, and more in the United States, but also around the world. A rising inequality in income and wealth, and we know that that is really a very basic cause of health inequities, and an inequitable distribution of the necessities of life. And I think as public health researchers, but also as professionals, practitioners, and activists, we need to be asking about what are the pathways by which these forces influence individual and population health. And my argument that I'm making this afternoon is that these are a fundamental cause of the public health crises. And if we're going to see something different over the next decade or two, we're going to need to take on those fundamental causes, as challenging as that is. These 6 factors, food, healthcare, education, work, transportation, social connections, I call the pillars of health. They determine the level of individual and community health. And I believe that the changes in capitalism have changed the way that these necessities of life, these pillars of health, have been distributed across communities and populations and the world. And I believe, and the optimistic note of this is that we have the potential, by helping people to understand how the changes in our political economy have led to changes and opportunities for health and disease, provide opportunities for getting at those fundamental causes. And what makes me especially optimistic in these very difficult times is that if I look at how public health has changed over the last 200 years, it's when social movements, public health reformers have come together and said, we're going to do something different. And that's the question I'm asking is, what is it that we need to be doing different in the 3rd decade of the 21st century to realize the advances that our predecessors have made in protecting human health? A question that many of us are asking is, how does racism and systemic racism, something that we have so much focused on in the last few years as a result of the Black Lives Matter movement and the murder of so many people, how does that intersect with commercial determinants framework and with capitalism? And many people, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, W.E. Du Bois, and others have expressed views on this. And I think this quote from Ibram X. Kendi summarizes what all those other people have said, that the system of capitalism and its the oppressions and stratifications it creates, and the system of racism, particularly as it has manifested itself here in the United States during slavery and after, those two systems have been inseparable. And we need to understand how we can take on dismantling the role that systemic racism plays in reinforcing the most toxic forms of capitalism and in creating and widening rather than shrinking health inequities. So I'm a health educator. I was taught when I went to School of Public Health a century or so ago that our job was to change individual behavior. I've spent the last several decades trying to expand the scope of public health education and public health practice to changing not only individual behavior, but also the behavior of corporations and businesses. And these are some of the business practices that influence patterns of health and disease: how they market products, how they design products, how they distribute products, what their price is, and these other things. And we also see a variety of political practices which have really corrupted our democracy. Democracy is a fundamental determinant of health. But when democracy is undermined, when people lose the right to vote, lose the right to have a voice in their communities, lose the right to shape their food system and their healthcare system, then the growing power of corporations and their supporters makes it much harder to pursue health. So we need to look at how we as public health professionals can begin to modify the harmful corporate practices that contribute to ill health and health inequities. Now, the problem is that there are many individuals and organizations and groups in this country and around the world working on these issues. But too much, in my view, we've been working in silos. And I'm trying to think about what we could do together to identify a few themes of taking on the commercial determinants of health that could start to unify the work that those of us who are working in food are doing, or in healthcare, or in environmental protection, or in immigrants' rights, or in protecting LGBTQ populations. How can we start to have some shared goals? And this is my proposal, and I'll be very interested in a discussion period, what your reactions are to these, how you would add or change these. First, because food is such a fundamental influence on health, I think we need to reduce the influence of corporations on the dietary choices of people in this country and around the world. Increasingly, the food choices put in front of us are decided by corporations based on what's going to be profitable to them, not what's going to be tasty or sustain our health or reduce health inequities. Second, I think there's a growing understanding that housing is a fundamental pillar of health, and that our putting housing almost solely in the market sector, where what gets built is what is profitable, and what doesn't get built are things that aren't profitable. We need to reassert a government role in assuring that affordable housing is available for all. I came of age in New York City in the 70s, 80s, and beyond. And in the 60s and 70s, there was a very small homeless population in New York City, mostly older white men on the street, people who had mental health and substance abuse problems. And in 1980, when Ronald Reagan ended federal support for housing, we began to see a change and a dramatic increase. And to my mind, that's a very clear indicator that when the government stepped out of assuring affordable housing for everybody, the market took over, and the huge problems that homelessness is causing around this country became much more salient. A third priority is work. Work is a really important influence on health. And I think what we've learned over the last few decades, the strongest guarantor of workplace health and safety, decent wages and benefits is unions. And for us in public health to say, we're going to expand the rights of workers to unionize and to protect, to speak for themselves, to protect their health and safety and their wages and sick pay and so on, would be a really important contribution to make. We've been talking for decades about universal health care. To my mind, the Affordable Care Act was an important step in the right direction, but we still have a long way to go. And starting to make concrete how we're going to make universal health care available to all Americans, at least in your lifetime, if not in mine, is another important goal we could agree on. And finally, given the urgent threat that climate change, but also other forms of pollution, present to human and planetary health, we need to create a new system, a new set of structures. So I'm proposing those as 5 goals that bring together the work that every one of you is doing every day already, but could start to say, here's a public health agenda for the 2020s. In order to do this, I think we need to find some common strategies. And I believe these are some of my ideas. And again, I welcome your thoughts in the chat and messages to me after this about what you would add to this. I think we need to be looking for upstream drivers. So much of the attention of not only the medical care system, but public health also has been on the most proximate behavioral determinants of ill health and not on the fundamental drivers, these 6 pillars that I've been talking about. Second, I think we need to talk about capitalism. Now, in public health, there's always been room for people who embrace capitalism, those who detest it, and those who don't have an opinion. I don't think we're going to reach consensus on that. But for us as public health professionals to not be willing to say the word, to not to understand how this system that we're living in influences patterns of health and disease is a little bit like doctors saying, it's too embarrassing to talk about the human body, we can't do it. It is what shapes how people live and how they stay healthy and get sick, and we need to talk about it. Third, I think we need to move away from the notion that we as public health professionals, public health departments, public health advocates can change public health practice by ourselves. Instead, as we've seen over the last 100 years or so, as I said before, we need to be finding allies in the social movements, the labor movement, the environmental movement, the climate change movement, in the Black and Latino and immigrants' rights and gay and lesbian and transgender movements. That it is when those movements are speaking about what they need to stay healthy, and we find ways to support them and amplify and provide the evidence they need, that we'll begin to see successes, as we saw in the progressive era, as we saw in the New Deal, as we saw in the civil rights movement. Fourth, I think we need to take a very strong stand saying there is such a thing as truth, and that there is such a thing as science, and we as a discipline are based on evidence. And for people to make up stuff about COVID, climate change, guns, and get away with it is a threat to health. And we need to find ways to bring that forward and both present evidence, but also tell stories that will enable people to see the value of truth and evidence in protecting human health. And finally, as I said, I think we need to insist that another world is possible. And these ideas create the possibility for a public health practice that moves beyond business as usual. This poster was on New York City subways a couple of years ago. It came from New York City passing a paid sick leave law and then educating people about it and trying to have everybody who rides the subway understand why paid sick leave was a good thing for New York, a good thing for its economy, a good thing for workers, a win-win. And we need to be thinking about how do we use the subway walls? How do we use schools? How do we use workplaces to bring public health messages, to change public health practices? We need to reassert the importance of regulation, taxation, and the other key responsibilities of government to improve public health and reduce health inequities. Giving tax breaks to the rich people does not make our country or our communities healthier, and someone needs to be saying that. Paul Farmer, who sadly died recently, a public health practitioner and an anthropologist, borrowed from the liberation theology movement of Latin America and talked about privileging the poor. In our public health programs, the poor need to come first, not the wealthy, and we need to center equity. How can we build those ideas into our everyday practice in public health departments, in community-based organizations promoting health? You all know the precautionary principle, that it's not that you prove something dangerous, that you prove something is risky before you, let me start again and say it right. We don't have to prove things dangerous before we stop using them. That the precautionary principle in public health says it needs to be safe before we expose thousands, millions, billions of people. And that is a fundamental principle of our discipline, and we need to be asserting that in local governments, state governments, and especially the national government, that this is what should be driving public health practice and regulation. Young people have always been at the forefront of social change and at the forefront of improving public health. And we, as public health professionals, need to look at how we enable communities, young people, and others to shape public health. I didn't put the word training or capacity building because they already have capacity. We need to find ways to support that and to enable them to use the capacity they have. And all that will require growing the public sector. So these are just a few ideas for developing a practice that moves beyond business as usual. And I hope we still have some time for questions and discussion. I want to thank some of my colleagues. I particularly want to thank my students at the CUNY School of Public Health who have, through our classes and our work together, have helped me to shape these ideas. These are a few articles, and this is a book I wrote recently where I developed these ideas in more detail. My email is down there if some of you want to be in touch. And I welcome your questions either in the chat or Maurice, however you want to do that.
That is perfect. Thank you. I realize that my video is not coming up, but there's nothing I can do about that now. Thank you for that wonderful and exciting presentation. Please feel free to raise your hand if you want to ask questions live, but we did get a couple in the chat that I can follow up on to start with. Can somebody click record again for me? One of our co-speakers.
It's recording again.
Okay, thank you. So let me go ahead and introduce our next set of three speakers. And again, I'm going to keep these brief. Again, if those are my co-presenters, co-hosts, can you please reshare the link to our bios? But we have April Aviles, who serves as the Director of Equity Inclusion at the New York Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, followed by Kathleen Conte, who is a Clinical Assistant Professor at DePaul University. And it will be followed again by Tammy, Pilisuk, who's been with the DrPH Immunization branch since 2000. And again, their full bios will be posted into the chat. I will go ahead and give it to you, April. Let me stop sharing.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm just gonna get this ready here. Turn that off. Okay. Well, first, hey everyone. Hope you're doing okay. Hope you had a great 5-minute break. My name is April Aviles. I am currently the Director of Equity and Inclusion at New York City Health Department, as Maurice said, but also, because I guess I just love to be busy, I was also working on my dissertation during the COVID-19 pandemic while working full-time at the health department. And, during the COVID-19 pandemic, as a woman of color, I know I experienced a great deal of trauma, and I know a lot of my my friends and colleagues at the health department have as well. So I actually decided to do my dissertation on a topic around that. So I decided to focus on racism-related stress and burnout among BIPOC US public health workers during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I wanted to share my findings with you all. So thank you so much for being here. All right, so, I first just wanted to start by saying, everyone here knows how vital it is to understand the experiences of public health workers during the COVID-19 pandemic, since so many of us served as the backbone of the emergency response. And as we all know as well, the COVID-19 pandemic really shined a light on just all of the racism that is still, that so many people still experience in this country, and also the racism that was exacerbated because of the COVID-19 pandemic, right? We've seen more anti-Asian hate crimes, we're seeing police brutality, we're seeing Black people getting murdered by the police. Like, there's a lot of trauma, right, that's happening in communities on top of communities of color also experiencing higher levels of COVID-19 infection and death. So, on top of, I would say on top of, all of the hard work that so many of us are doing, there's also these greater traumas that we're experiencing and facing, both vicariously, but also, personally. So because of that, my theory, but also my real lived experience was that, I felt like BIPOC public health workers, I feel like their health may have suffered, they may have suffered greater stress and more negative impacts because of this during the pandemic. So again, that's what I decided to study. And I just wanted to first just go through 3 of the types of racism related stress, also known as racial trauma, that I decided to focus on for this. So the first is vicarious racism, which is, I guess, more of the racism that occurs when hearing or seeing racist acts that happen to other people, that happen to family members. I would say George Floyd's death was a great example of that, of folks seeing that and experiencing that could be a form of vicarious racism. Workplace discrimination and harassment is also another form of racial trauma. Unfortunately, I know many of us here may know what that looks like, whether it's racial microaggressions or it's, blatant racist statements said in the workplace. And then there's also the minority tax, also known as cultural taxation, that happens that I feel like isn't talked about as much or talked about, but maybe not using these terms, right? And that's really when people of color are asked to take on extra responsibilities in the name of diversity. So, being asked to be on DEI committees or leading conversations around race, or it being, National Hispanic Heritage Month. And so I'm being asked to, lead a committee on planning events for that. These sorts of things are examples of cultural taxation. And so I did, purpose. So again, I did want to focus on just identifying various predictors of burnout among BIPOC public health professionals, including racism-related stress. And so I was able to recruit folks online via social media campaign, and this all happened extremely quick. Just within a matter of a week, I did this. So in that time, I was able to get around 830 responses, but with duplicates and all that fun stuff, I was able to analyze 486 completed responses. And so now in terms of the results here, we have the demographic background characteristics. A majority of the respondents did identify as female, Black, and most were born in the US, and the median age was around 33, and the majority also had at least a bachelor's degree. And I'm just going to go through these quick, at the end of this, I'll share my contact information, and I would be happy to provide far more data. I have plenty. I'm just, dropping little tidbits for this presentation, but I'm happy to share more after for anyone who's more interested. And then also in terms of public health background, the average years of public health of respondents was around 5 to 7 years. Most folks were employed full-time, and around half of the respondents did work at a city, state, or federal health department. Other respondents worked at places such as academia and a clinical setting and whatnot. When it came to defining public health, professional, we tried to keep it as broad as possible, right? Since so many of us work in different places. And then in terms of the top 3 areas of work, most did say that they focused on working on vaccination response, contact tracing, or worked within a dedicated COVID-19 unit. Now, in terms of past year mental distress, when asked, this is a percentage of folks who experienced either insomnia, depression, anxiety, or trauma within the past year. And I know I'm not the only one, that sees these statistics and percentages and may also feel like I am part of those, but also sees that these are, glaringly high as well. And then here, in terms of workplace discrimination and harassment, I know this is very text heavy, but I like to be fully transparent when showing the data, but these are the 9 questions that were asked as part of the chronic workplace discrimination scale. And this is basically the results of anyone who's ever dealt with any of these. So you can see, again, also extremely high percentages, with number 5 being the highest, with really almost all 96% of respondents reporting that they feel they have to work twice as hard as others work. And then when utilizing the heightened vigilance scale, when doing a median score of that, there was actually a moderately high level of heightened vigilance seen in participants. And here again, you can see the 4 categories, or the 4 responses that folks were asked, and with the highest here being over 91% of respondents reporting that they carefully observe what happens around them. So, as you can see, many respondents were living in a state of heightened vigilance during the pandemic. And then here we have our results for cultural taxation. When getting a median score for this, it came back to be a moderate level of cultural taxation. And here, when the categories for agree and strongly agree were combined, you can see the results here for how folks answered these questions. And again, I know I'm going quickly through these because I do want to be respectful of the other presenters. So Maurice will be sharing these slides, and I'm happy to share more of this as well with anyone afterwards. Now, in terms of burnout, the study variable, when analyzing and doing the mean, we found that there was a moderately high overall level of burnout among respondents. And when disaggregating that further, we found a moderate level of disengagement and actually a high level of exhaustion among respondents, which to me, again, as someone who's personally experienced a great deal of exhaustion, that makes sense. Now, in terms of further analyses, I did conduct Pearson correlations to see if there were any significant relationships between burnout and any of the selected study variables. And here you can see that the higher the level of burnout, that there was also a higher level of past year mental distress, higher levels of chronic work discrimination, and higher levels of vigilance. Cultural taxation didn't show any significant relationship or significant correlation here. And then I also conducted backward stepwise regression, which showed that higher burnout was significantly predicted by higher past year mental distress and higher vigilance. So for this one, cultural taxation and chronic workplace discrimination, higher burnout was not significantly predicted by those, but was predicted by higher vigilance. And so those are just some of the results of my dissertation. As anyone else knows, that there's plenty more data that I could show with y'all. But for the sake of time, I did want to go into some of the implications and recommendations here. And as I mentioned, this was a quick survey that I conducted. If I had a great deal of money and all the time in the world, I would have definitely wanted to do a larger sample and better disaggregate, especially by specific, race, ethnicity, by gender identity, ability, and activity status. That would have been really great data that I would have loved to seen. And also, having a larger sample so we can see really if there is an association between cultural taxation and burnout, which in this became a non-significant trend. And also accessibility, should be taken into account for any future research, as this was a study that was just conducted online for people who have access to internet and devices to take the study. And also, in terms of recommendations, measures should be put into place to reduce experiences of burnout and mental distress. And there are a great deal of ways that we can do that, as well as recommending that there be broad and long-lasting investments in public health, including, within, staff as well. But I say all that to also say that preventing burnout among BIPOC public health professionals, it can't happen without addressing the racism-related trauma and disproportionate burden that's placed on them. And I felt like this study really underscores just how imperative it is for BIPOC public health professionals to feel psychologically safe within the workplace. And I know, just going off of the previous presentation that Dr. Freudenberg did, he talked a lot about, business and corporation practices and that need to be changed. And, I also want to say that we also need to shine the flashlight inward at public health institutions and our organizations to see how we also are perpetuating racism and harming our staff of color and creating environments that can lead to higher burnout. And as someone who does work at a health department, I have, personally seen just how many folks have left the health department within, even just the past year because of this. And as with every study, there are limitations. And I just wanted to conclude by saying that, there were aspects of race-based stress that were associated with higher burnout, and that we really do need to spend more time addressing institutional racism in the workplace. And so with that, I want to, just change my screen so I can see everyone and get some questions going.
We're gonna save it for the end. We're gonna
okay.
As a group. So we're gonna transition
right,
to Kathleen. So those who have questions, please save them. We're gonna do it as a group panel in time.
Thank you, Maurice. And I will put my contact information in the chat as well. And if anyone has questions and they want to put them in the chat, I can hop on there and answer.
Perfect.
Thank you.
If you could stop sharing, and Kathleen can jump in. Okay, it's all yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Kathleen Conte. I'm excited to be presenting for you today. Thank you for the opportunity, because this is some research that I started with my students about a year or so ago. And it's a partnership project with colleagues in Australia. And this is some initial findings that we have been putting together in a course over the last couple months. And I was eager to present it and share it with you, and also to get some feedback and some help thinking through what it is that we're seeing in this data. So I'm presenting on behalf of a team whose names are there: Bianca Alvarez, Aaron Augustine, and Dr. Nikki Percival, who's based at University of Technology, Sydney. I want to pay my respects to the Indigenous owners of the land on which I live, work, and play, and those are the Multnomah, Clackamas, and Wasco people in Portland, Oregon, and honor all elders past, present, and emerging. This research came about 2 years ago because I'm involved in a community of practice for people who work in health promotion in Australia due to some previous work that I did there. And in this community of practice, which is pretty focused on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health, we were sharing how people were adjusting and adapting to health promotion, dealing with the pandemic at the time. And as we were hearing stories from the field, we were learning that folks were really having their workplace and their work focus being disrupted, being reassigned to work on COVID, and needing to abandon or at least put on hold the important work that they were doing in health promotion other health promotion areas, put them to the side to address COVID. And we thought, we really need to be capturing some of these stories, but we were also really concerned about what was happening to those priorities that had been longstanding, but now were seeming, to be pushed aside for other pandemic response reasons. A study that came out last year showed that of health promotion workers in the US, 43% did report that they had changes in health priorities. And so I wonder if that number is probably higher than even what this study reports. So we put together an international comparative study, a qualitative study with the specific objectives of trying to understand how COVID has impacted the field of health promotion, with a particular emphasis on addressing health inequities and minority populations, and to get people to think about what the implications of this are for the field in the long term. So it was a qualitative study with semi-structured interviews. We recruited folks through the APHA listserv, so through this caucus and also through the public health education health promotion arm. And likewise, we recruited folks in Australia through professional networks. This was a collaborative project supported by DePaul University. And so the interviews were conducted by MPH students in 2021. And then the initial analysis I'm presenting here was presented or conducted by MPH students who were enrolled in that same class this year. So we talked to folks for about an hour on questions about what their work had been like, how did it change, how did programs get adapted, how did their partnerships change during the pandemic. And then we asked some big picture questions like, what do you think is the most important thing that we need to be learning to go forward here? I guess some background just about Australia at the time. In 2021, when we did these interviews, which is about April, May, they did not have significant lockdowns at that point. They were still kind of trucking along business as usual with some restrictions on travel between states. And they had a very heavy nationally organized and state organized contact tracing program that they were using. Whereas at the time, the US had already been through sort of not enforced, but locality by locality variations in how much people were going out. But we were kind of coming out the other end because the vaccine had already been launched, and we were really focusing our efforts on vaccination and reopening at that point. Later, Australia went into more significant lockdowns. So this is a particular point in time in the pandemic. So we had about equal amounts of interviews from each country, 15 interviews from the US and Australia. And here's some information about our sample, mostly people identified as white or Caucasian, and mostly they identified as female. Unfortunately, we did not get a very high proportion of minority populations participating. I think that has a lot to do with what our speaker previously said about burnout. Anecdotally, what we were hearing from our partners in Indigenous health at the time was that they were just doing way too much. So participating in interviews was just too much. The folks that we interviewed were mostly health promotion officers, some managers, one policymaker. Mostly there were people who had been in the field for quite a while, which was our intention, especially with using students as interviewers. We wanted to get people who had some perspective and were willing to share that on the field. So we developed a code book. We went through the basic stages of coding data line by line with multiple people doing that. And we're kind of just at this member checking stage. We've done a few presentations back to our community of practice, and now I'm presenting to you, hoping to get some more ideas and insight about what it is that we found. So the presentation today focuses on how priorities in health promotion have shifted. So like we expected, things got rattled up. Many programs ceased altogether. So whether that was for a couple of weeks or a couple months while people were figuring out how to work remotely or how to transition their programs into virtual modes, that definitely we definitely saw programs stopping and services stopping for periods of time. We also saw that health promotion professionals are reporting having to compete for priority action. So having to compete against other areas of public health for resources and for time to be able to work on things. So for example, obviously COVID, like most communicable diseases, gets primacy, gets a lot of attention versus chronic health conditions, which were kind of put as a lesser priority. Many people were pulled away from their focus of work, in chronic disease and tobacco policy work, things like that, to have to work on COVID. And other folks had to work both on COVID and do their own job at the same time. So we also looked at health equity and what folks had to say about that. And this idea started coming up, particularly around the word again, that people were saying things like, we've seen this is happening again. Disparities are getting worse again. We're seeing the gaps widen again. So you can see in these quotes that these people are saying, I think a lot of people are in the whole racial equity piece and concerned that this isn't going to be a time in which we get very excited over it. We start working, but maybe we move a certain distance and it all dies down again. I think a lot of it, with the health equity has been kind of pushed to the forefront with COVID, bringing it up again and all that disparities and everything. So this idea is coming up for us that maybe what's going on is that health promotion practitioners seem to be feeling a sense of guilt around this, that, that the challenges that they've had to deal with in COVID and being transitioned away from their original priority areas is just a repeat of things that have happened in the past. This first person who works in drug and overdose is saying, that's people are dying. My job is to prevent that. And so that's pretty intense. I have to deal with that. This next person is saying, here we're going down the lane again. The ones who are most severely affected are going to be, again, the most poor, the ones with less health literacy, the more vulnerable are the ones who are going to be most affected by COVID and the COVID response. And it's something that we've ignored for far too long. So just to sum up, I know that was super fast, but in sake of time, it seems like COVID, while it has provided an opportunity to reframe and rebrand some of what we do in health promotion with an emphasis on addressing health inequities, there's still problems, there's still gaps here in terms of our preparedness for emergencies, meaning that things that we are working on get shifted and changed and undercut in some senses when issues like COVID come up, and that our existing strategies for addressing health inequities are problematic. They're not working, and people in the field are highly aware of this. And so when it does come up again in a context of a pandemic, they're highly aware, but also seeming like they're unsure what they need to do for next steps in order to address these inequities effectively. So thank you. I think I'm right at 10 minutes.
That was perfect. Thank you. If you stop sharing, thank you. Tammy, it is on you.
Okay. Share my screen. I don't see my presentation up here. Not sure what happened to it. Sorry, everyone, you're seeing my email. Give me a moment.
I think your second tab has it open. On the top, if you go COVID on your browser.
I think that looked like my video.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wasn't able to load myself because I have to have a account on the Dropbox or the shared drive. So I didn't have time to download on my end.
I think I'm good. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Tammy Pilisuk, and I'm a health educator with the California Department of Public Health, but I'm going to be wearing my California Immunization Coalition hat this morning, as that's a project that I lead, the ShotByShot project. And I'm going to be going rather quickly through my slides this morning. I'm mostly describing the new collection of stories that we have on ShotByShot, the COVID stories.
Sorry to cut you off, Tammy, but we still see your email account. We're still looking at your email.
Oh, let's see. Why?
You may need to do a new share and pick the correct window that's open. It sounds like you have it open. There you go.
Can you see this now?
Yep, we're there.
See the slide? Okay. All right. So I'm going to be sharing about our story collection of COVID-19 stories and just a little bit about how we work with partners. And okay. And so I'm assuming that most of you are not familiar with ShotByShot, but it's a project by the California Immunization Coalition. And even though it's based in California, it's actually has a national audience. It started in 2010, so it's been around for a while. And it really focuses on stories told by people who have had personal experience with vaccine-preventable diseases. So these are some examples of some of the partnerships that we've had with other groups that have shown our stories. The National Foundation for Infectious Diseases, Immunization Action Coalition, and CDC show some of our stories. And I personally love this quote by story guru Andrew Goodman, who talks about the power of stories. No one ever marched on Washington because of a pie chart. And if you think about George Floyd's story, that really encapsulates the power of stories. No one presented a dissertation or a report about all of the people who are getting killed by gun violence. It was the visceral reaction to a very dramatic story. And so that is really a very powerful example of how storytelling can really galvanize people to react and to mobilize, in this case, really globally. And so now, of course, we're in a situation where we've had a global pandemic, and we have data. For example, here's just a chart that I cut out from the Pew Research Foundation. This was in March, where they're talking about, approaching 1 million deaths. And, a couple of years ago, we could not have possibly imagined this. And yet data is the currency that we speak in public health. And it's gotten to be that it's almost routine to talk about how many people are dying in our current pandemic. Yet when you look at this graph, it's very difficult to wrap your mind around what that means. And I think it, becomes that way for the public as well. So I want to play a little clip here.
honestly, I don't want to think about it too much. The stupid virus could ruin my body and give me a chronic illness that I'll have the rest of my life. If you are tired of hearing about the coronavirus and tired of everything that it's done to our lives lately and the restrictions we've had to endure this year, I would beg you to just endure it a little bit longer, because I don't want anyone to have to go through what I have gone through and what I'm going through. And it's crazy to think that it was all from just a virus.
Okay. Are you back with me?
We are still seeing the video right now.
All
You might
right.
need to start and stop again.
Okay. Are we back?
Still seeing just the video tab right now. You might need to just close the video altogether.
Do you see the slide yet?
Yep, we're back. Story
Okay.
and data.
All right. So at this point, I often ask an audience, what strikes you more, seeing a chart or watching a personal story like Tanya's story? And people will often say that seeing a personal story, even though it only represents one person, whereas a chart may represent 1 million people, will touch them more, will touch them in their heart or strike them in their gut. It's just more memorable. Now, of course, I'm not suggesting that we throw away data and substitute it with stories, but one thing that you can think about is using a personal story as a supplement to a data, literally putting a face to go along with your data. And it can be as simple as taking a visual, like a photo and a compelling quote to supplement the data that you're using with presentations to go along with even a conference presentation like this, to remind people that there are humans behind the data. And so that's kind of something that I talk about when I talk about using the shot-by-shot stories. And so I want to spend some time just going through and sharing some of the COVID stories that we have available. And there are so many that I can't really go through them in detail. So I'm just going to share a little bit about what we have in our collection. And in early January 2021, we had our first volunteer for COVID stories. Nurse Cynthia called up, and she had had COVID and spent 3 weeks in the ICU, and she wanted to share her story. She was able to get vaccinated, and so that was our first story. And at that point, everyone was clamoring for stories. but I was able to partner with other organizations to build our story collection. So that's really what I want to share with you. And I broke this down into different groups within our COVID collection. So we have stories from vaccine hesitant, or I should say formerly vaccine hesitant folks. And some of these are really great, like Emily's story really lit up our Twitter feed. She was very compelling. Her parents are conservative. And Jeff is from a rural area. Stormy is a healthcare worker. So really interesting group of people. Here are some stories that mix those some of these folks are just making vaccine statements. We decided to include people who just wanted to address the importance of being vaccinated. And I thought this was important because they're addressing really diverse communities, the Latinx youth community, the African American community, the LGBTQ transgender community. Ryan is a young teacher. Sarah talked about being young and getting COVID, not believing that she was at risk. Daniel's story is very compelling. He had a stroke complication as a result of getting COVID.
Tammy, we're at the time, so we can allow for Q&A and allow for the next session. So if you have any burning points, please wrap up in the next minute.
Oh, okay. I was afraid I wouldn't get through my slides. And we have stories in Spanish. And we have stories from nurses and doctors, from pharmacists, from families, stories from long COVID survivors. And I worked with a lot of organizations. And I guess I can leave it there.
Thank you, Tammy, and thank you all. And again, the aim of this was to really provide highlights for folks. So we do encourage folks to follow up with individual speakers on the content that they're sharing. But with that, we do have time for some Q&A across all three presenters. And so feel free to enter the chat or raise your hand. And Tammy, if you can click stop sharing on your end.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. And I guess while we wait for folks, I will start with Tammy. Well, I'll start with yours actually and say that I actually was attending a presentation yesterday from Dr. Turner from Michigan State University, and her first name is missing. I want to say Michelle Turner, but Monique Turner. But they were talking about this need for messaging and marketing, and not using the traditional. We're talking about from the tobacco perspective of how we usually using like FAIR from, if you think about the truth.com perspective, but really changing that framework to being more about making more personal and not using FAIR as much as using something that resonates and things about various dynamics, such as, using empathy and trying to diverge. I just think a lot of the work that you're doing here aligns with the stuff that they were talking about yesterday, about this new paradigm of addressing stories and trying to resonate with folks. So I just wanted to share that. It's more of a comment. And then Kathleen, if you don't mind raising, what were the key questions you had about your slide, about your presentation? I know you were looking for feedback. I want to see if anybody had any initial thoughts, just to put that back on the framework of people.
Yeah, I was really interested in this idea of professional guilt and if that resonated with folks. This idea that we're responsible but not doing enough in the field and how people are thinking about that.
Hi, I actually had a comment, and my question for Dr. Conte, I'm not gonna bring up any big terms. My name is Dr. Otekunrin. I'm not a public health speaker, but I was just I guess my main question was why you didn't use a lot of the I guess people of color, minorities in your research. I know you said something about, well, you don't, it would then be another burden to them to use them. But I just had a feeling like, at that time during COVID, that actually it would seem that it would be a welcome thing for them instead of like talking to managers. I mean, the whole, going back to Miss Aviles' talk. Thank you so much for that. Talking about the fact that, we really need to, get to talk to more of the people than the managers, for example, because I remember you said something like that. Like, I mean, do you see that maybe there's a little gap, if not a lot, in your presentation based on not actually talking to the people that would really be the people you would need to talk to really get the data you were looking for? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. It's an important point. So the way that we recruited for the study was that we just sent out requests through this listserv and other listservs at APHA asking for folks to come to us to be part of this study. And we interviewed almost everybody who came. And if we didn't interview somebody, it's only because they didn't follow up with us. In Australia, we started the recruitment through the listservs and our professional networks of Aboriginal health workers, so people who are very much on the front lines, as you're saying. And I think we ended up only speaking to one person. So we did try to get folks who are really, working in the field, who are working with minorities, who identified as one of those populations to participate. But the feedback, when we did try to get Aboriginal people, for example, to participate, we just couldn't find time in their schedules. So I think it has to do with maybe when this was happening. It was also an international study across 3 or 4 time zones because the students are based in Chicago. I'm based in Portland. Folks were in Australia, and it was crazy trying to get everybody in the short window for the students to do it as part of a student project. So I completely agree with you that we are definitely missing an important perspective in this data.
I just wanted to follow
Thank you.
I just wanted to follow up for April. I just wanted to say I personally felt burnout and this extra burnout because I was a person of color at my job and being asked these follow-up questions like, hey, can you work on this memo? Do you have these thoughts? And it being like it was my responsibility to take on the voice for the company, which kind of, made me think about leaving at that point just because of just extra thought that one, I felt like I was working harder before, and now there's this extra thought on it. So it's just an interesting that your data was capturing that as well. I think it's a shared story a bunch across folks of color.
Thank you. And yeah, I'd say that's the reason why I decided to do research on it, because it's something that I kept hearing, with my colleagues and with my friends and stuff. We're seeing folks talking about burnout and stuff, but they're not talking about the other reasons why we're really burnt out. Like now there's this racial awakening, and we got white folks left and right asking us to teach them about racism, and like, okay, but we're also dealing with a lot of trauma right now. Like it was a lot. And on top of that, we're also working on the COVID-19 response, and we're seeing inequities in how that response is going too, and the inequities of what's going on within our own workplaces. So, and how that's harming communities that look like us, and harming our own communities. So, there's a lot there. And, I know, like, just as you said too, that led to a lot of burnout. And it's something that, when we talk about, storytelling, Tammy, like these are narratives that, folks of color, we wanted to see that data, because I will speak for myself. I was tired of feeling gaslit, like, that this wasn't happening, that it was all in my head. Like, no, like this is real. And I'm going to do a little research to show that I'm not the only one that feels this way. Right. So, I would say that on top of this, I did collect qualitative data. I didn't include it in my dissertation because of the time constraints I had, but that's what I'm going to work on right now, is being able to look into that qualitative data to really now provide those, those qualitative narratives. Because just like you said, Tammy, that's so important, because now it's great to have that data, but there's a lot of deep stuff in those narratives, of just what, folks of color have really experienced, during the pandemic, and working for the pandemic, working during the pandemic too.
Thank you. And with that, we are going to transition to phase 2, Voices from the Field Part 2. Let me go ahead and just briefly share my slide to present our speakers. But again, this set of series, again, is all still under the framework of health equity, but a different lens, looking at particular conditions and situations. And so with that, we're going to start off with Thometta Cozart, who is the Multicultural Outreach and Health Equity Director for the Epilepsy Foundation. And then we'll be followed by Iván Flores, who is a recent graduate with a Master's of Public Health and Community Engagement at the University of Central Oklahoma. And then we'll end with Dr. Adejumobi Otekunrin, who is also a recent graduate with a MPH and a certificate in maternal and child health from Georgia State University. And so with that, I will stop sharing and give the floor to Thometta.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me go into presentation mode. The computer is working really slow today. Sorry, everyone. Okay. All right. So I want to say thank you for allowing me to present. I'm going to talk about epilepsy disparities and a seizure-safe nation. So I am presenting on behalf of the Epilepsy Foundation. And so we are a national nonprofit. We lead the fight to overcome challenges of those who are living with epilepsy. We really do work to try to accelerate therapies to stop seizures. We are trying to find cures, because right now there is not one, there's just treatment. And then we try to save lives by addressing barriers. Much of the work that we do is funded by CDC, and so I must acknowledge them. So epilepsy can affect anyone of any age and any gender, race or ethnicity, culture or economic status. But we do know that there are some disparities that exist with those who are coming from different racial, ethnic, and lower socioeconomic populations. And so I just wanted to highlight a little bit of that today. First, I want to talk about what a seizure is, just to make sure we're all on the same page. So a seizure is a symptom of a disturbance in the brain. It is a sudden surge of abnormal electrical discharges in the brain, and it is a symptom or a clinical aspect of an other medical problem. So something else is going on for you to actually have a seizure. And so in terms of epilepsy, now you can have a seizure and not be diagnosed with epilepsy. But if you have 2 or more unprovoked seizures in such a very small time frame, and that means you didn't have a fever, you did not have a fall, there was nothing that actually happened before to actually trigger for you to have that seizure, and it happens again and continues to occur. And again, you cannot tie it to anything else medically, then more than likely, if you see a neurologist, you are going to be diagnosed with epilepsy. Now, who has epilepsy? 65 million have it throughout the world. Here in the United States, we have an estimate of about 3.4 million people are living with epilepsy. And we know that nearly 500,000 of those are youth. And of the 1 million adults, they're mainly older adults. And so 1 in 26 people will develop epilepsy in their lifetime. The older you get, it increases the likelihood that you may develop epilepsy. And that's even more so if you happen to be an African American. And I'll talk more about that later. And so in terms of racial and ethnic disparities, of that 3.4 million that I spoke of, around 40% of those are individuals who are coming from racial and ethnic populations, specifically African Americans and Hispanics. And so though we know epilepsy does not discriminate, we do know that people of color that are living with epilepsy have an increased burden of having a poor outcome when it comes to their diagnosis. And so I just wanted to touch upon that here just to make sure that people are aware, because there is a low awareness of epilepsy and a lack of knowledge as well. And so to be able to address stigma and to dispel myths, we and I specifically talk around the aspect of epilepsy as much as I can, and be able to provide the facts and the data about what we do know. Even when there's limited research, we still try to give the information that we do have. And so there's nearly 600,000 Blacks, non-Hispanic, who are living with epilepsy, and around 3 in 200 Asian Americans. There's approximately 710,000 Hispanics, and then more than 51,000 American Indians and Alaskan Natives. And so where we really see disparity areas, and I'm going to target in African Americans right now, is the fact that men who are Black and non-Hispanic are actually at the highest rate of dying of epilepsy. And that is also from a variety of issues. And so we're starting to look more in terms of those determinants of epilepsy and where are those areas that we really need to make more collaborations. And we're hoping that this presentation will help us to do that. We also know that African Americans are more likely to be diagnosed with epilepsy the older they get because of, again, a variety of factors, but mainly strokes. And so my own personal experience has been that my father had a stroke in 2019. And thankfully, because of the work that I do, I was able to get my family trained in seizure first aid and to make sure a neurologist was already on his care team because of course, 2 years later, he did have a seizure. And we do know that that seizures follow strokes. And this is another campaign that we have. And so if anyone works in the area of strokes, we would love to give you more information around that. We also know that African Americans are diagnosed with epilepsy more in emergency rooms than any other population, and specifically when compared to whites. And mainly that is because of the fact that they don't actually have an epilepsy diagnosis. And so they're really trying to manage their seizures on their own, and they're going to emergency care instead of actually having a care team. We also know that they're more than likely to have seizures that that become a medical emergency, meaning they're lasting more than 5 minutes. And again, that's because of poor care management. And then they're at an increased risk for sudden unexplained death from epilepsy, which is SUDEP. And so all individuals who are living with epilepsy, even more so individuals of color, really have an issue with being able to have appropriate and specialty care, being able to afford it or being able to find it, or even being able to have culturally competent workforce. There is a lack of neurologists in this country, and even more so those that are of color. And then there's a lot of comorbidities that go with epilepsy, including mental health. Depression and anxiety is a major issue. And we really understand a public standpoint, that fear, misconceptions, stigma, and discrimination really do not help individuals who are living with epilepsy feel comfortable being able to share. And so they really don't have the same type of support that people who are living with other chronic conditions do. And so this gives us an aspect of where we know that there are higher concentrations of active epilepsy. Why this is important for us in terms of working in public health, and again, just the aspect of looking at my bio later. I used to work in state health departments, and so I understand that if and chronic condition or disease area is not funded through block grants, through CDC, then state health departments, and then also that means usually many local health departments don't look at it. So as we know and see how many active cases of epilepsy are throughout the country, we really do need more partners and support to be able to help us to be able to support our population, because that area of support is not at the state health departments and not local health departments either. And so CDC's epilepsy program did put this infographic together, and it helps us to be able to talk again to partners of why and how they can help us in terms of being able to address individuals that are living with epilepsy. We understand in terms of the challenges, and I'm gonna hone in on what's in the middle of this infographic. It's really looking, when we talk around determinants of health, to be able to understand that children who are living in poverty really have a hard time being able to be seizure-free. Individuals who are not able to be able to control their epilepsy through medicine alone, some of them have a hard time then being able to afford surgeries. Many adults who are living with epilepsy have 4 or more other chronic conditions. And so of course, that's even harder to manage. And then many adults are also not able to work or drive. So these are all areas of their life that make it extremely hard for them to be able to live every day. And so again, we are hoping that people on this call would be interested in working with us to be able to focus on how we create a seizure-safe nation. And so one of the things that we're creating is a social media kit and toolkit for partners. The image and the post that you see on the screen is a part of that. We really do want people to understand and know that if you're living with epilepsy, or even if you just have a seizure-related disorder, or if you're the family member of a person, then you can come to the Epilepsy Foundation, not just for just the aspect of epilepsy, but we can help with other determinant areas too, and social needs. As you see here, we're promoting the fact that we've made more partnerships with local food banks. Our 24/7 helpline is an opportunity, again, for you to partner. Organizations can sign up to be a part and be one of the resources that are a part of our helpline. But again, if you see individuals who have seizures or may have epilepsy, please send them to our helpline. And again, it's 24/7, and we're close to being able to be like a 211 relay service for people who are living with epilepsy. We do have a variety of resources and programs. I know this is a lot of information on this slide, but the main point here is to make sure that regardless of what sector you work in or where you are in terms of who you are, if you're a parent, if you're an individual who has epilepsy, if you're a provider, if you work in schools, we have something where you can help to support us. If you work in advocacy, we're really trying to have more states pick up our Seizure Safe Schools Act. We have 14 states currently who have done it. This act makes that anyone who is working in a school must know seizure first aid. They must be trained in seizure first aid and epilepsy awareness annually. That seizure first aid fact sheets must be in schools and readily available. Also, if students have seizures, then the school must look at how they can implement their seizure action plan and help that family be able to have a 504 plan. So these are resources that we have, again, for people who are living with epilepsy or parents. Also, these are the things that we want to make sure that you guys walk away with in terms of how we can create a seizure-safe nation. First and foremost, if you're not Seizure First Aid certified, please consider doing that. We provide an international certification similar to CPR. You get a 2-year certification, and you can put that on your resume or, again, be able to use it if you need it. If you are already trained, please consider having your staff members and other people be trained. help us to dispel myths around epilepsy and decrease stigma by, again, talking to people about it, giving them factual information about it. There are people who still have fears, and there are some cultures that they do believe that you are possessed, that your family has done something wrong. Those are all aspects of cultural appropriateness, and we do not take those things for granted, but we do give factual information to be able to help and support from still a respectful way. We do have self-management programs for individuals who are living with epilepsy, and we're looking for more community-based settings to be able to offer those. So if that's something that you can offer to us, please do let us know. Again, if you're working with a variety of workforces and community, including community health workers or school health nurses, please do let us know, because we have training for them. And one of the aspects of what I wanted to make sure I added to this presentation for this population is advocacy. So again, we do not have programs at state health departments, but each of the state health departments do have their behavioral risk factor surveillance system questionnaires that they do to collect data at the state level. There are epilepsy questions that have been a part of that particular questionnaire. Please consider asking your state health department if they will continue to add those questions, or either add those questions for the first time. It would really help us to be able to have more state level data around epilepsy surveillance. If you do messaging around chronic disease, please do.
Sorry not to cut you off, but
overtime. Sorry.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Sorry, not to cut you off there. You have the last slide. Please finish your last moment. Go ahead.
Okay, no problem. Last but not least, of course, I want to make sure that everyone knows that we are having a seizure first aid training on the 28th, and we're going to be looking at, again, how men are impacted. So please come. It's free for everyone. And again, you get a 2-year certification. All right, with that, I will stop sharing. Thank you.
Thank you. Iván, it's all on you.
Okay, everyone. Hello, everyone. My name is Iván Flores. I'm a recent graduate from the University of Central Oklahoma in the Masters of Public Health. And one of my presentations that I have for you today is talking about my elective course that I took earlier this spring semester about addictive behaviors as a psychology class, and kind of bringing into light and compounding the field of public health as well as psychology. So some of the objectives for this presentation is defining addictive behavior of cigarette smoking, reviewing current literature and statistics about this issue, also the impact of this issue, as well as recognizing the gaps in knowledge base, not only within research, but also in community engagement, as well as community health. So in epidemiology, and with the current literature as well, lifetime smoking rates are higher among patients who are diagnosed with major depression disorder, accounting for 59%, as well as just people with living with bipolar disorder of 83%, and individuals living with schizophrenia or other psychotic disorders, accounting for more than 90%, compared to 32% among US adults with no presence of mental illness, as well as 70 to 85% of individuals with schizophrenia also use tobacco among current smokers with a lifetime history of depression, anxiety, or other mental health symptoms. The more cigarettes that they smoke, the more dependent that they become as a coping mechanism, which leads into unhealthy outcomes. And smokers with serious mental illness have increased risk of dying from cancer, lung disease, and cardiovascular disease, and they account for more than 200,000 of the 520,000 tobacco-related deaths each year. And the American Lung Association has also studied about this, about nicotine dependence is higher among those who have a behavioral addictive behavior as well. So it's kind of like illustrating how this issue is currently in 2018. This is a current map of the United States. And as you can see, with having data from 2018 and how we experiencing the pandemic in 2020, how we can see the health disparities really shine light of how social isolation and having the pandemic really take into the lead of the forefront of how much mental health and other unhealthy behaviors are really driving up these preventable deaths among US Americans. So the literature review, there was a lot of common themes about cigarette smoking and addictive behaviors, whereas needing to have successful cessation, a lot of individuals had mentioned in their research studies that support groups and having a community-based approach was the most accessible and most successful in order to provide these services, in order to provide more people with other alternative behaviors in order for them to discontinue the use of cigarette smoking. And some of the characteristics, as well as the social ecological model, was very important to also explore how your environment really matters and how there's disproportionate rates of cigarette smoking and other addictive behaviors among communities of color, of low income, and other marginalized communities. So some of the treatment in prognosis, as I had mentioned, cigarette smoking remains one of the leading causes of preventable death, disability, and disease in the United States, and it accounts for 1 in 5 individuals in the United States. So for about 21 of every 100 adults in the United States who regularly had feelings of anxiety, which accounted for 21.4%, engaged in cigarette smoking, and about 11 out of 100 adults who did not regularly feel feelings of anxiety accounted for 11.3% of smoking in the United States, as well as looking into depression. Those who felt those symptoms accounted for 26.9%, and those who did not feel such depressive episodes accounted for 11.8%. And so it really shows into the accountability of knowing that your health is not just the presence of physical health, but also with the implications of your mental, emotional, spiritual, social, and even cultural health has a very high impact of health outcomes, not only within the community, but also in the prevalence and incidences of preventable diseases. So one of the things that you can utilize to assess the addictive behavior for cigarette smoking, one of them is the modified Fagerstrom test for nicotine dependence. It's a very short survey that you can utilize with just 6 questions, and I'm more than happy to provide that survey to you if you would like. And so some of the questions is just asking the individual patient about their cigarette intake and how they're engaging with cigarettes, of the amount that they're smoking, or if they utilize how they experience cigarette smoking within their own daily routine as well. And then utilizing the public health approach and utilizing the trans-theoretical model to understand how can we engage with communities to provide cessation efforts of cigarette smoking, and providing that opportunity for community members to really engage in dialogue and more of that qualitative aspect of community engagement, to really understand how we can provide these services that are adapted and not just a cookie cutter of just addressing these nicotine packets, or just providing a very solid timeline of when you should start cessationating from cigarette smoking. So going into the impact of the addictive behavior of cigarette smoking, there's a lot of implications within research. So populations versus subpopulations is a very major thing that I had found through the literature review, and not only just within cigarette smoking, but across different public health issues, is that, for example, whenever you're going to engage with a population such as the Hispanic or Latinx community, the research oftentimes, in order to engage in the threshold to provide statistical analysis, that they include all the subpopulations under the umbrella of Hispanic to provide that analysis. And one of the things that it's oftentimes exploited in research is that my lived experiences as a Mexican is not the same as those who are living in Costa Rica or in Brazil or in other Hispanic countries and Latinx communities where our experiences may be similar in some of the cultural implications, but we're also vastly different. And we need to understand that those implications needs to be accounted for in order for us to really provide adapted and culturally sensitive services, not only within our subpopulations, but also with communities of color across identities as well. And also looking into vulnerable populations for such as the LGBTQI+ communities, as well as individuals who are living with a disability and not having that support that they need in order for them to find alternatives and other forms of engagement, whether if it's socially or independently as well. Some of the things with public health is the social determinants of health and levels of prevention. Oftentimes when you enter the healthcare system, it very focuses on intervention instead of prevention strategies. And it's one of the things that we need to really focus on in order to provide the preventative measures in order to really mitigate these preventable deaths. Because one of the things that some companies have done in order to address these issues, such as CVS Pharmacy, with no longer providing nicotine products in their stores. However, that's not being able to provide adequate preventative measures, because even though you're limiting the access to these products, you may have people being led to adopting new addictive behaviors, whether it be alcohol or gambling or any other addictive behavior, in order to replace that coping mechanism. And if you're not providing a community-based approach, you're just furthering the optimization of community health outcomes. One of the things that I did find that was very interesting and very passionate about sharing with is the National Standards for Culturally and Linguistically Appropriate Services that is provided by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Specifically, the Office of Minority Health really provides a free online training for not only clinical practitioners, but also community health and even community members to really engage with this free online source, that they can engage in how culture is very important for your health and wellness, and how we can integrate that as part of the key components of your mental, physical, emotional, social, and culture as part of your overall health and well-being. So with that, I thank you so much for your time. I have my email presented, and I will also include that into the chat box below. And then you can also find me on LinkedIn if you want to further continue on with the conversations. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And it's on you, Dr. Otekunrin.
Thank you. Can you see my slides?
Currently, no, you might need to, I'm not sure if you clicked share yet.
Okay. Yeah. Can you see my slide now?
Not yet, we still just see you, but we do not see your slides.
You can see my slide? Okay.
You might need to stop sharing and click share again to start.
Okay.
You clicked share your computer sound, but you didn't click share your screen. I think that's what happened.
Let's see. Can you see my screen now?
Yep, there you go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adejumobi Otekunrin. I'll be presenting Firearm Epidemic in the United States, a call to action with the following outline. The United States is currently facing a firearm public health crisis. In plain terms, it is a firearm epidemic. This situation obtains because national debate on the issue of gun violence rarely focuses attention on the continuing role of the gun industry in perpetuating this public health crisis. Most of the efforts to address gun violence are focused on the demand side of the problem and ignored the supply side actors like the manufacturers, the importers, wholesalers, and gun retailers. Firearm manufacturers in the United States operate with no federal oversight over the design or production of their products. From 2008 to 2017, the most recent years for which data is available, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, about 250,000 people died from firearm-related injuries. And in 2017, according to the CDC, gun violence was responsible for about 40,000 deaths, reaching a 20-year high, and injured twice as many. Of these deaths in 2017, about 60% committed suicides, 37% were homicides, 1.39% were due to legal intervention from law enforcement agents, 1.22% were unintentional deaths, and 0.85% were of unknown cause. Currently, about 100 to 120 people are killed daily from firearms, with twice to thrice as many having serious injuries and incurring health, economic, and social costs throughout their lifetime. Firearm-related deaths now exceed motor vehicle deaths in the country due to the steady decline by about 59% between 1969 to 2012 in motor vehicle deaths and injuries following the adoption of seatbelt laws and other safety measures. Curiously, since 1972, firearms have been exempted from safety regulations by the Consumer Product Safety Act, making firearms the only consumer products not subject to federal health and safety regulations. Regulation of the firearms industry by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the ATF, the agency with the oversight of this industry. This agency has been historically underfunded by the Congress, making it almost impossible for the agency to conduct effective and consistent oversight duties. In 2019, for instance, out of the 1.3 billion budget for the ATF, 1 billion was devoted to law enforcement activities, while only 299 million, representing 23%, was devoted to regulatory activities and oversight of the nation's firearm manufacturers, dealers, and importers. And as of 2019, the agency could only employ 770 industry operations investigators for field operations to conduct compliance inspections for over 13,000 licensed manufacturers, 53,000 gun dealers, and 9,500 licensed explosive manufacturers. The lack of political will to effectively regulate firearm industry is greatly influenced by the pro-gun lobbying led by the National Rifle Association through its Political Action Committee, which spends an average of $250 million annually. The demography of gun violence in the United States shows that this gun violence crisis disproportionately affects the American youth, with injuries from homicide, suicide, and unintentional shootings the third leading cause of death among children aged 1 to 17 years old. Data also shows in 2017 that almost 3,500 children and teenagers were killed by firearms, representing one death every 2.5 hours among these youth. Also, a study in 2016 shows that this problem of firearm death among American youth is unique to America because among high-income countries, 91% of fatal firearm mortalities between children ages 0 to 14 in 2010 occurred in the United States. Analysis of firearm deaths shows that access to a gun in the home increases the risk of death by suicide 3 to 5 times. Firearm suicide is found to be higher among white males compared to Black and Hispanic males, according to research in 2020, and also higher in rural areas among gun owners. Firearm homicide also disproportionately affects Black more than white males, and fatal police shootings, though not usually considered in firearm homicide analysis, is a significant contributor to the gun violence crisis in the United States. Evidence shows in 2017 that an estimated 987 Black African Americans were fatally shot by police. And also, sadly, American youth are very overrepresented in these shootings. Although firearm homicide from mass shootings account for only a small percentage of about 109 firearm-related deaths daily in the United States, the increasing prevalence and vulnerability of everyone makes mass shooting a headline grabber in this public health crisis. Now let's talk about where this really eats our pocket, individually and as a society, the socioeconomic cost of gun violence. The breakdown of the $280 billion gun violence cost shows that it could have heterogeneous effects. The quality of life cost is about $214 billion. Work loss cost about $51.2 billion. Police and criminal justice cost about $10.7 billion. Medical costs about $3.5 billion. And employer costs about $500 million. All these costs represent the cost paid by the government with taxpayer dollars, out-of-pocket costs paid also by relatives and families of these gun violence victims and their employers, and also the intangible costs of quality of life from gun-related injuries and death. This analysis is from the Healthcare Costs and Utilization Project of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Policy recommendations to address this health crisis. I want to utilize the socio-ecological model for firearms prevention. This model is an evidence-based approach to address the firearm public health crisis in the US at 4 levels of framework: individual, relationship, community, and societal. Laws and policies can mitigate the risk at all levels of this model and thereby improve public health, socioeconomic, and other outcomes. Universal background check laws operate both at the individual and society levels of this model. Currently, federal law mandates licensed firearm dealers to conduct background checks on individuals who desire to purchase firearms through the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. However, this federal mandate does not involve private firearm sales, and evidence shows that 20% of purchases are made without background check. The Extreme Risk Protection Order, otherwise known as the Red Flag Law, permits family or household members, law enforcement agents, and in some states, healthcare professionals to petition the court to dispossess individuals at risk of harming themselves or others of the guns or firearms in their possession. About 19 states and the District of Columbia enacted this law since July 2020. The Child Access Prevention Law holds the owner of a firearm that is inappropriately accessed or caused injury to a child or others accountable. And this has been shown in states that enact this law to have reduced firearm injuries among juveniles. The School Weapons Ban, through enforcement of the Gun-Free School Zones Act of 1995, that prohibits possession or discharge of firearm within school zone, is also recommended. Improved access to mental health care with screening and treatment for mental health and substance use disorders is critical to reducing the risk of self-harm and interpersonal violence by individuals with the condition. Evidence shows that when adequately treated, patients with mental health or substance use disorders rather become victims rather than the perpetrators of violence, including gun violence. Better reporting system for intimate partner violence will ensure that domestic violence offenders gun ban of 1996, the federal law that prohibits domestic abusers from accessing firearms, will not only apply as it currently is to current or former spouses, parents or guardians, or cohabitants of the victim, but also to dating partners, because evidence shows that about 50% of intimate partner homicides involve dating partners. The key amendment of 1996 that barred federal agencies like the CDC from funding research to advocate or promote gun control for over 23 years should be completely and totally repealed. In 2019, it was partially repealed, leading to Congress allocating $12.5 million each to the CDC and the National Institute of Health for firearms research. But we need a total repeal of this law. Same with assault weapons ban.
Dr. Karen, I just wanted you to know we are at time, so I know you have one more slide.
And in conclusion, gun violence affects every fabric of American lives: worship, schools, recreation, shopping malls, hospitals. The case in point is the recent massacre of children at the Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. Once again, this is proof that firearm epidemic is not only taking the lives of too many Americans, but also the lives of our country's brightest hope for the future, our kid. Congress must pass common sense gun safety regulations for responsible gun ownership. And finally, safety of our lives is as and arguably even more important than inflation and gas prices. Thank you. Over to you, Maurice.
Thank you. If you could click stop sharing, please. Just thank you. I just want, and I want to acknowledge that we're going to probably go a few minutes over. We're going to allow about 5 to 6 minutes for Q&A right now, and then we'll close. So we'll probably end closer to 3:40 than 3:30. Just want to give that head nod. But if the speakers can all come back or unmute or have their video on, and if folks have questions, please feel free to raise your hands or use the chat. And to get things going, Thometta, can you just, what do you think are, do you think that that the epilepsy is just not something, how can we improve communication about epilepsy among the African-American population? Like to me, that this was the first time I've seen something like this, noting this disparity, noting that disparities occur almost over any chronic condition. But I didn't know that it was alarming for this condition in particular. So what do you think are the recommendations? What would be your approach for helping facilitate better communication about this?
Well, thank you for the question. So first and foremost is to be open about talking about it. It's a lot of the aspect that we do not discuss it. And we do have individuals in our family who have had seizures. And then we just, keep it in-house. We also don't allow our entire family to know what's going on. So becoming trained in seizure first aid, I think is step one. Everyone should be able to help someone if they're having a seizure. So the more you know, the more you can help each other. It's only, 3 very simple steps in terms of staying with the person, being able to time how long their seizure is, and turning them over to the side to keep them safe. So, so that's number one. In terms of the disparity aspect and carrying the message is, again, partner with us with the Epilepsy Foundation. We are, I definitely can say I work very hard to be able to talk around about epilepsy in very common ways, and I connect our national health observances. I connect our racial and ethnicity months. Like Black History, we had a full campaign to talk around epilepsy, and we were in Essence magazine to do so. So make sure that you are able to get the information that you need, but get it from us. Let us just give you the social media posts and give you the messages and give you the tweets and the images. But yeah, definitely make sure, again, the first step is to get trained in seizure first aid.
Thank you for that.
You're
Dr. Otekunrin, you shared a bunch of policy recommendations. Which of those do you think is the most pressing to address now? And you're on mute.
Thank you. I think the Congress is taking the right steps in that universal background check for all gun sales, including private sales that are not covered now, needs to be enacted. Same with the red flag laws that will make household members, friends, relatives, law enforcement agents, and in some states, as it were now, healthcare professionals that suspect that an individual is unstable to be able to petition the courts and dispossess such individuals of gun or other firearms. Also, the Dickey Amendment, is very important that it's completely repealed, because the research that the CDC did that led to gun lobby instigating Congress to ban funding of this research is the research that found that having gun in the home, rather than being protective, rather led to increased risk for gun deaths in the home. So we need such academic public health research to be able to have data nationwide to address sincerely evidence-based policies against this violence. And lastly, assault weapons ban is important. For now, suicides is responsible for 60% of gun violence, but at this rate at which we're having mass shootings, taking lives of 20, 50, in the case of the one in Las Vegas, 58 lives at a go. It's going to take over soon. And nobody is safe. They do all this stuff at every place: worship, malls, schools, and all. So I believe those three, for me, are very critical. Those four policies, rather, they are very critical.
Thank you. And then,
Also, I have a quick question on the topic. Thank you so much for your presentation, Dr. Otekunrin. For me, I see like it's like an elephant in the room. Why no one is talking more about this lobbying of the NRA, and why? Because now the NRA, they're the ones lobbying, they're the ones trying to, stop the CDC from doing research. So why are people not talking more about that and how to maybe curtail the NRA instead of people talking about what individuals should do and not what the bigger end of it should do, like the NRAs and things like that. Just a question, sir.
Yes, thank you for your question. The problem with that is that the NRA funds politicians across parties, in both Republican and Democratic parties. And that's why it's so important that we make this issue, if it's not well attended, we place it on the ballot in November. Because gun violence, what's the essence of talking about inflation, saving funds and all of that, and then the person loses his life, his or her life, just like that, in a go. So it's as important as inflation and gas prices, and we need to let our politicians know this.
thank you for that.
Thank
And
you.
Iván, I did have a question. I think your presentation focused a lot on cigarette smoke, but did you have any thoughts or perspectives on electronic tobacco products and on nicotine dispense products and how that's impact the health disparities across that?
Yeah, and nowadays we are seeing a surge in we're leaving behind like the traditional cigarettes and we're shifting into the e-cigarettes or vaping. And that's one of the things too that with vaping, there's a lot more nicotine percentages and it's more concentrated and much less consumption volume. So that's one of the things that's going to be like very interesting to see in research, as well as how the new consumption of vape use is going to be affecting health outcomes across different populations.
Thank you for that. And thank you again to our presenters here and from session one. And I'm going to now transition to closing, and we'll open the floor to our chair, Ebony Johnson.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is such a pleasure to see all of you all, and I am so excited to be able to close us out this afternoon. I want to take a few minutes just to thank all of our speakers who did such a phenomenal job on their sessions. I would like to thank our featured guest speaker, Dr. Nicholas Freudenberg. Also, I would like to thank our presenters from our two sessions. One, the Voices for the Field, the COVID-related content. I would like to thank April Aviles, Kathleen Conte, and Tammy Pilisuk, who is one of our CHPPD leaders. From our Voices from the Field, broader public health perspectives, I would like to thank Thometta Cozart. She's also one of our members, our leadership members, Iván Flores, and Adejumobi Otekunrin. I hope I said that correctly. Thank you so much for the very informative information. I too learned a lot, particularly the violence prevention, the epilepsy work, and then Iván, your presentation was just absolutely phenomenal. So thank you so much. I also want to take a moment to thank our wonderful leadership team who has worked tirelessly around the clock to ensure that this great event can happen. First, I'd like to thank our organizer and host, Maurice Johnson. Thank you so much for all of your hard work and executing this vision that we had. I also want to take a moment to thank some of our other CHPPD leaders. Deja Knight, thank you so much for all of your hard work in this production. Whitney Rogers, thank you so much for your content and monitoring the chat for us. And Gilbert Arvizu, thank you as well for all of your input and helping with our speakers. We cannot be successful without our leadership team, and I want you to know that I appreciate you so much for everything that you do for our section and our membership. I also want to thank you again for attending. You could have been anywhere, but you chose to spend time with us, and we are so thankful for your attendance. I also want to let you know one last time that we actively fundraise in our section. Our fundraising efforts help to ensure that our students, our early career professionals, and our professionals can attend our annual meeting. We're really excited this year because we have several different ways that you can donate to our section. We have a new giving platform. And so as you can see here, we have a QR code that you can use if you would like to make a one-time donation, or if you would like to make a recurring donation, which I've personally signed up for. It is a great way, again, to show support for our emerging public health professionals. So we would like to encourage you, if you can, please contribute to the success of our upcoming professionals by donating to our section. And last, I want to let you know that you can keep up with all of the great activities that we have for the section. As you heard earlier in the program, we are active and very busy. And so we keep a full calendar of events. We also like to share those events through our various platforms. You can always reach us if you have any questions at chppdsection@gmail.com. You can also keep up with current events with the section and with APHA, the organization, through our Twitter account, and that's at APHA_CHPPD. You can follow us on Instagram at CHPPD section. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, and we're the APHA Community Health Planning and Policy Development section. And you can review all of our content on our YouTube channel, and which is APHA CHPPD. Again, on behalf of our section, I want to thank you for joining us, and we look forward to connecting with you again, and we hope to see you at the annual meeting in Boston. Thank you. Back to you, Maurice.
Thank you all. You all have a great rest of the evening. Enjoy your Juneteenth weekend, and we will see you all via email and hopefully in Boston. Have a good one.